On the morning of March the 20th, 1995, the Tokyo subway system was operating under normal weekday conditions. As one of the busiest urban transport networks in the world, it carried large volumes of commuters during peak hours, particularly between 7 and 9 a.m. At approximately 7 a.m., coordinated actions were carried out across multiple subway lines. Individuals boarded trains carrying plastic bags wrapped in newspaper. Each carried a quantity of liquid sarin, a highly toxic nerve agent originally developed in Germany in the 1930s. It disrupts the normal functioning of the nervous system by inhibiting an enzyme necessary for regulating muscle activity. These individuals were members of the religious organizations Aum Shinrikyo and would be responsible for one of the most devastating terrorist attacks in Japan's history. Welcome to History Unpacked. If you enjoy the content, consider subscribing. We post every week and we welcome any feedback. Once aboard the train, the attackers placed the drugs on the floors of the subway carriages and punctured them using sharpened umbrella tips. After releasing the liquid, they exited the trains at subsequent stations. The sarin began to evaporate and spread within the enclosed environment of the subway system. Because it is both colorless and in many cases odorless or only faintly detectable, passengers were initially unaware of its presence. Within minutes, individuals exposed to the agent began to experience symptoms. These included blurred vision, eye irritation, difficulty breathing, nausea, and loss of motor control. In more severe cases, exposure led to convulsions, paralysis, and respiratory failure. The attack affected 5 subway lines, all of which converged in central Tokyo, particularly in areas close to government and administrative districts. Emergency services were alerted as reports of illness began to emerge from multiple locations. However, the nature of the incident was not immediately understood. Early responses were complicated by the lack of clear information and the unfamiliarity of first responders with chemical nerve agents in a civilian context. As a result, some emergency personnel and station staff were themselves exposed while assisting victims. The final confirmed death toll from the attack was 14 individuals. Over 1,000 people were injured to varying degrees, and several thousand more reported symptoms consistent with low-level exposure. Although the number of fatalities was relatively limited compared to other forms of mass casualty attacks, the incident was significant due to the use of chemical weapons in a civilian setting. The organization responsible, Aum Shinrikyo, had been established in the 1980s by Shoko Asahara. Asahara presented himself as a religious leader combining elements of Buddhism, Hinduism, and apocalyptic Christianity. His teachings incorporated ideas about spiritual enlightenment, karma, and an impending global conflict. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, the group had attracted a substantial following in Japan. Notably, many of its members were highly educated, including graduates in science, medicine, and engineering. The group established a hierarchical structure with strong internal control. Members were often encouraged to sever ties with family and external society. The leadership exercised authority over both ideological beliefs and daily activities. Over time, the organization developed increasingly radical doctrines. Asahara predicted a coming apocalyptic war, which he believed would involve major global powers. Within this framework, the organization positioned itself as a group that would survive and ultimately play a leading role in a transformed world. To support these beliefs, the group began to invest in infrastructure and resources beyond those typical of a religious movement. This included land acquisitions, laboratory facilities, and the recruitment of individuals with technical expertise. By the early 1990s, the organization had initiated efforts to produce chemical and biological weapons. Among these, sarin became a primary focus. The group succeeded in synthesizing sarin in its own facilities, marking one of the few instances in which a non-state organization developed a nerve agent independently. Prior to the Tokyo subway attack, Aum Shinrikyo had already used sarin in a separate incident. In June 1994, a release of sarin occurred in the city of Matsumoto. The attack targeted a residential area and resulted in several deaths and injuries. At the time, the cause of the incident was not immediately attributed to Aum Shinrikyo, and the event did not lead to immediate intervention against the group. This early attack is now understood as both a precursor and a test of the group's capabilities. By 1995, the group's leadership had become increasingly concerned about potential investigations by Japanese authorities. There were growing suspicions regarding the group's activities, including allegations of illegal practices and disappearances associated with the organization. In response, senior members of the group authorized a large-scale attack in Tokyo. The selection of the subway system was strategic. It ensured a high concentration of people within enclosed spaces, maximizing the potential impact of the chemical agent. The method used to disperse the sarin was relatively unsophisticated. The liquid was transported in plastic bags and released manually. As a result, the purity and effectiveness of the sarin were limited. Despite these constraints, the attack caused significant disruption and casualties. It had been widely noted that had the sarin been more effectively produced and dispersed, the number of fatalities could have been substantially higher. In the aftermath of the attack, Japanese authorities initiated a large-scale investigation. Attention quickly focused on the group. Police conducted raids on multiple facilities associated with the organization, and these operations uncovered evidence of chemical production, including laboratory equipment and stockpiles of precursor materials. Investigators also identified documentation and records indicating the group's involvement in both the Tokyo attack and earlier incidents. Shoko Asahara was arrested in May 1995 at one of the group's compounds. Subsequent legal proceedings extended over several years. It was during this time prosecutors presented evidence detailing the structure of the organization, its activities, and the decisions leading to the attack. Multiple senior members were also arrested and charged. The trials resulted in numerous convictions. Asahara was found guilty of orchestrating the attack, along with other crimes including murder and illegal weapons production. In 2018, following a lengthy appeals process, Asahara and several members of the Aum Shinrikyo were executed. Although the leadership of the group was dismantled, the organization did not disappear entirely. Successor groups emerged, most notably Aleph and Hikari Nowa. These groups operated under increased surveillance and were subject to regulatory controls imposed by the Japanese government. While they publicly distanced themselves from the violent actions of the Aum Shinrikyo, concerns remained regarding ideological continuity. The Tokyo sarin attack had a lasting impact on Japan's domestic security policies. Emergency response procedures were revised, particularly in relation to chemical and biological incidents. Training for first responders was expanded, and coordination between agencies was improved. The attack also led to changes in legislation, including stricter monitoring of religious organizations engaged in activities considered a threat to public safety. More broadly, the incident influenced international discussions on terrorism. It demonstrated that chemical weapons, previously associated primarily with state actors, could be produced and deployed by non-state groups. This raised concern about the accessibility of hazardous materials and the potential for similar attacks in other urban environments. Academic analysis of the attack has focused on several key factors. One area of study has been the internal dynamics of Aum Shinrikyo, including mechanisms of control, recruitment strategies, and the role of leadership in shaping group behavior. Another area has examined the social context in Japan during the late 20th century. This includes the effects of economic stagnation following the collapse of the asset bubble, as well as broader questions about social integration and identity. The role of Shoko Asahara has also been a central focus. Asahara exercised significant influence over the organization. His authority was reinforced through both ideological teachings and organizational structure. Decisions within the group were often framed in terms of his interpretation of religious doctrine. This concentration of authority contributed to the group's capacity to carry out coordinated attacks. In the immediate aftermath of the attack, the Tokyo subway system resumed operation relatively quickly. However, the event had a lasting effect on public awareness. The use of a nerve agent in a civilian setting represented a departure from previously understood patterns of domestic security threats in Japan. It highlighted the potential for unconventional methods of attack within highly developed urban environments. For those directly affected, the consequences extended beyond the initial incident. Some survivors experienced long-term health effects, including vision problems and neurological symptoms. Psychological impacts were also reported, reflecting the nature of exposure to an invisible and poorly understood hazard. The Tokyo sarin attack remains a significant case in the study of modern terrorism. It illustrates the capacity of non-state actors to acquire and use chemical weapons, as well as the challenges faced by authorities in detecting and responding to such threats. It also provides insight in how ideological movements can evolve over time, particularly when combined with organizational resources and technical expertise. In historical terms, the attack is often examined alongside other late 20th century incidents involving non-conventional weapons. Its significance lies not only in the number of casualties, but in the method used and the context in which it occurred. A coordinated chemical attack carried out within a major global city by a domestic organization represented a development that had not been widely anticipated. The events of March the 20th, 1995 continue to be referenced in discussion to the security, public safety, and the regulation of hazardous materials. They remain an important example of how emerging threats can develop outside traditional frameworks and how responses to such threats have evolved in the years since.